no God. Stamp eternity on my eyeballs.
Why didn't I have a word? Because there was no sign of anguish.
Não me diga que essa geração é extravagante. Ser extravagante é ser como Estevão.
Not to be like the world, and not to be like the great majority of American Christians, but to be like Jesus Christ. Don't know why you're clapping. I'm talking about you. Talking about you. Talking about you. Talking about you.
On TV. We're on television. Just, you want to talk about racism? Then go to the liberal media. Every time you see a television program, usually it's a black guy trying to rape somebody's white daughter or selling drugs in the hood. I mean, just look at that. That's what, most people are scared. Most white people are scared to death of black people because the only black people they've ever seen are on TV. And vice versa. Most black people think every white person is a racist. Because usually when a white person is put in that context, he's some Ku Klux Klan guy from Alabama. And when you actually get to know an African American person, you go, oh, he's a human being. It's the same way with your enemy. Distance and lack of communication will just tear you apart. Also, you have to deprogram them with regard to the lies they've heard. Well, if a person believes this, it means they believe this and this and this one. It's not true. I mean, I hear people stand up and speak against sovereign grace, and I think to myself, if that's what sovereign grace was, I wouldn't believe in it either. So you have to get to know them and love them and care for them and live with them and earn the right to go in there. Earn the right. Now I'm going to say one other thing, and you've got to be very careful here. It's a balance. You cannot be reactionary in the ministry. You cannot do things all the time or say things all the time just because of your thinking of the reaction or the interpretation of your hearers. At the same time, you need to take that in consideration. We need to be as innocent as doves. We need to be as wise as serpents. If I go into a place where I know that the people, for example, they hear about sovereign grace and they think it means all sorts of things that it doesn't mean. Well, I'm not going to go in there and play to the devil's hand, throwing around sovereign grace or Calvinism or this or that, because what they think it means, I don't believe. I'm going to go in there, for example, I know a guy that had asked a bunch of different preachers to come preach in his church. And literally they were all, when they went in there, they were wrong. It seemed to me that each preacher went in there with this Martin Luther reformed, I'm going to reform you, preached for 2 or 3 days, angry, mad, told everybody they're sinners, it's not even a church and everything else, and then left. And so I was the next preacher to come. And they really thought, you know, okay, here comes the Godzilla of all mean preachers. So I got in there, and for the 2 times I preached on the unconditional love of God and begged men to come to Christ. Whosoever will. And all the enemies of that pastor who had all this ammunition against him, they were just waiting for me to come so that they would get the final killing bullet out of me to put that pastor out of that church. And I knew that. No one told me that. It's just years of experience. I knew exactly what was going on. And so I went in there and did exactly the opposite of what they expected, and it deflated the entire situation. You see what I'm saying? You have to use wisdom. Knowing what your enemies expect, knowing what they're going to use against you, and not playing into their hands. Now, not being deceitful, but at the same time, showing them who you really are. I thought it was amazing that Ravenhill, When he preached, sometimes it could be terrifying. But when you went up to talk to him, he was like the warmest fella. It just threw you off. You found out who he really was. Man, this isn't just some mean guy mad at the world. It's a very loving man. That's what they've got to see in you.
Paul, I've got a thought here. It's something we need to go back and maybe expound on. Use the term self-validating, which I know exactly what you're saying. But like when Moses came down off the mount, you didn't call attention to the glory on his face. They recognized it. And I feel like without the supernatural power of God and Reformation and revival, self-validating does not mean that self validates itself.
Right.
It means that these guys need to immerse themselves in Scripture and walk in integrity in the fear of the Lord. And then over a period of time, people begin to see that there is something different. And as you say, they earn the right to be heard.
Right. When I mean self-validating, I do not mean that you validate self. I'm not using it as yourself, himself, herself, but itself. The ministry ought to be validated itself. And how is it validated? It's validated only by the power of God. The godly results it produces. You know, several years ago, I'll give you an example. I took my wife with me to a place that was very, very strict. It was in another country where I had preached before and God had really moved. And when we walked through the door, this woman came right up to me. You know, my wife, Chartle, she dresses very modestly, but she just dresses normal. That's it. I mean, she doesn't wear some religious garb. She just dresses normal. And this lady walked up and right in front of me, in front of my wife, said, "Brother Paul, you preach with such power of God on your life, and God uses you so much. How could you be married to a woman like this?" Now, the woman was a young woman, and she was actually quite attractive. It's just that she had made herself almost look haggard. And no makeup, she had a veil on and all sorts of things, and was just like this, just very bitter looking. And my wife, just with a smile and a twinkle in her eye, said, "Do you have a picture of you before you were an unbeliever, before you were a believer?" And the woman said, "Yes." Charles said, "I'd like to see it. Do you have it on you?" And yes. "Okay, let me see it." And the lady opened up her purse and pulled out this picture, and here was this vibrant, beautiful girl smiling, a little bit of makeup on her face, nothing extravagant. And Charlotte looked at her and went like that, and she goes, "You know, I like you better as an unbeliever." And then she handed her a picture back, and she said, "What has Jesus done for you?" She goes, "All I see is a mean-spirited, critical, haggard, joyless person standing before me. Is this what Jesus has done for you? And is this what Jesus is offering the world?" Now, the whole point was this woman came proclaiming truth, but the truth had nothing but, the truth supposedly that she was speaking had no positive effect whatsoever in her life. Another thing, a guy came to me a while back, and I love being here in Alabama, and I love this church, but I'm a very small church type guy. I love house churches. I love a very simple lifestyle, everything. But I love this church, and God's called me here. And some guy came up to me and he goes, basically what he said was, just right in my face, young guy, "You've compromised." I said, "Really?" He said, "Yeah." I go, "Okay, how?" And then, you know, he pointed out that I actually have a truck, well, it's a Chevy Blazer that actually runs. I don't know how much longer it's going to run, but it runs. I have a normal house. And he just started going down through all these things. My clothes didn't have any holes in them like before, and all these different things. And I mean, he was nitpicking me apart.